Hello, everyone. I decided to begin a chapter book today. It's called The Spray Paint Mystery by Angela Shelf Medeiros, and I'll read a chapter every couple of days until I'm done with the book. Chapter 1. The New Kid. Third grade stinks, Cameron Thompson whispered to himself. He had been a third grader for 2 whole months and couldn't believe he'd been afraid to move from second to third grade. He'd worried all summer for no reason at all. What would happen if he couldn't do third grade work? They would probably put him back in second grade, that's what. He'd be the biggest kid in the whole class. Everyone would make fun of him. Now here he was, a big bad third grader. Big deal. Cameron was usually the first one to finish the reading assignment. Today, it had only taken 8 minutes for him to answer all the questions at the end of the chapter. He timed himself. Everyone else was just turning in their work. Third grade was nothing to be afraid of. Okay, class, Mrs. Sutton said. Everyone has finished the reading assignment. Now, let's talk about something really old. She clipped a picture of a woolly mammoth on the board. Cameron sat straight up. He loved prehistoric animals, and the woolly mammoth was one of his favorites. The mammoth was a part of the elephant family, Mrs. Sutton explained. Some mammoths had tusks that were 15 feet long and weighed as much as 250 pounds. Cameron quietly ducked his head under the top of his desk so Mrs. Sutton couldn't see him. Then he turned around and smiled at his friend Jesse Rivas. I'm a mammoth, Cameron said, with 2 pencils sticking out of his nose. These are my tusks. Man, that's gross, Jesse whispered. But be careful. Those pencils are going to get stuck, and you'll have to walk around like that forever. The principal's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. Mrs. Sutton, said Mr. Garcia. The speaker's buzzing sound made Cameron jump. The pencils wiggled up and down, but they didn't fall out. Maybe they were stuck. The rest of the class started to giggle. Cameron yanked the pencils out of his nose as fast as he could. Mrs. Sutton looked at Cameron and rubbed her forehead. She always did that when she was getting a headache, usually 3 or 4 times a day. Be quiet, class, so that I can hear, Mrs. Sutton said. Mrs. Sutton, please send someone to the office. We have a new student who has been assigned to your classroom. I'll send someone right away, Mrs. Sutton said. Cameron. Yes, Cameron said. Please go to the office. You may escort the new student to our classroom. Okay, said Cameron. And Cameron, said Mrs. Sutton, you've been doing very well. But please, no funny stuff for the rest of the day, okay? I'm sorry, Mrs. Sutton, Cameron said. Okay, Mrs. Sutton said as she wrote him out a hall pass. Cameron took the hall pass and walked quickly down the hall. Mr. Murray, the janitor, was throwing a bag into the trash can. Suddenly, the bag split open. Can after can of red, green, and blue spray paint cluttered to the floor and rolled down the hall. Cameron stopped to help him pick it up. Thank you, Mr. Murray said as he dropped the last can into the trash bin. Where did all of those empty cans come from? Cameron asked. Well, Mr. Murray said, someone painted graffiti on the wall behind the gym. They left those empty cans all over the ground. What a mess. Does anyone know who did it? Cameron asked. No, Mr. Murray said. It's a mystery. Cameron started to smile. He loved mysteries. His father was a police detective. Cameron loved to hear about the cases his dad was working on. Maybe I can find out who's spray painting the walls, Cameron said. I'm a third grader during the day, but at night, I'm a super detective. Well, the case is yours, Mr. Super Detective, said Mr. Murray. Thanks, Mr. Murray. I'll do my best to solve it. I've cleaned a lot of graffiti in my time, Mr. Murray said, but there's something strange about this paint job. What? Well, it looked like they changed their minds and tried to scrub some of the paint off. That's weird, Cameron said. Why would they spray paint the wall and then try to scrub it off? Beats me, said Mr. Murray. You're the super detective. You figure it out. I'm going to sandblast that paint off the wall this afternoon. Can I have one of those empty spray paint cans? Cameron asked. For what? Well, it's a clue, Cameron said. I'll hold it for you until after school, Mr. Murray said. And by the way, what are you doing in the hallway? Cameron held up the hall pass. How did you win a free trip to the principal's office this time? I'm going to get a new student who's coming to our class, Cameron explained. I see, said Mr. Murray. No, I've been really behaving myself, Cameron said. And I got a good conduct sticker every day last week. That's wonderful, Mr. Murray said. Keep up the good work. And by the way, why was it that you had to go to the principal's office last time? Well, Cameron said, I got into some trouble for tying the bow on Terrence Johnson's dress to her chair. Mrs. Sutton called her to the blackboard, and she dragged the chair halfway down the aisle. It was pretty funny. Mr. Murray smiled. You better get going. You don't want to keep Mr. Garcia waiting. And thanks again for your help. I'll see you after school. You're welcome, Cameron said. I'll see you later. Cameron ran down the hall. Walk, please, Cameron. You know the rules, Mr. Murray shouted. Cameron slowed to a walk. He quietly pushed open the door to the principal's office. Cameron, 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 said Mrs. Parker, the school secretary, with a smile. What did you do this time? Did you tie Terrence's dress to her chair again? No, I'm here to get the new student, Cameron said. And besides, I haven't played any joke on Terrence for 2 whole weeks. Good for you, Miss Parker said. Have a seat. Mr. Garcia will be with you in a minute. Cameron sat down. He looked around the office. Someone's backpack and notebook were neatly stacked on the other end of the couch. The notebook was decorated with bright colors. Before Cameron could have a closer look, Mr. Garcia appeared. Cameron, Mr. Garcia said, I thought we decided we weren't going to see your lovely face in here again. Mr. Garcia stood in front of Cameron and folded his arms. A small boy in a bright yellow jacket quickly picked up the notebook and backpack. He looked at Cameron shyly. Mrs. Sutton sent me here to get the new student, Cameron explained. Oh, I see, said Mr. Sutton. He put his arms around the new boy. Miguel Oliveras, meet Cameron Thompson. Miguel and his family are from Houston. That's where my mom lives, Cameron said. She took me to Fun City. I rode the Shake Your Liver Till It Quiver rides like 8 times. I like that ride too, Miguel said. Well, it looks like the two of you have something in common, Mr. Garcia said. Welcome to Austin and to Pecan Springs Elementary School, Miguel. I'm sure you'll like it here. Cameron will introduce you to your teacher, Mrs. Sutton. Thanks, Miguel said. Come on, Cameron said. I'll show you where our classroom is. Good luck, Miguel, Miss Parker said. Thank you, Miguel said. See you later, Cameron said to Mr. Garcia. Well, I hope I won't see you later, Mr. Garcia said. When they got in the hall, Miguel asked, Do they have a soccer team here? Yeah, Cameron said. We practice on Saturdays on the field behind the school. I love soccer. Me too, Miguel said. It's the best game there is. Cameron smiled at him. I think so too. Give me 5. Miguel raised his hand, and the smile slipped off of Cameron's face. He looked at Miguel's hand. It was covered with streaks of red, blue, and green paint. Oh man, Cameron thought to himself. The new kid is my main suspect in the spray paint mystery. Until next time.